Hello everybody, Raspberry Barrel here. Gravity Falls and Journal 3 belong to Alex Hirsch and Disney Channel. Please go support Gravity Falls and go buy Journal 3. Hello guys, we're here back at it again to read the next chapter of Gravity Falls Journal 3, as of course you know from the title and the introduction. Okay, where we left off, Ford was just telling us all about the different dimensions that he traveled in his 30 years of being gone from Earth, or whatever the dimension is called. I think he said it was called the 46th dimension. But the direct point that we left off was Ford telling us about the two-dimensional dimension and how it was a real mess there, and and the shapes there were like trying to attack him because he was an irregular shape. But thankfully he was saved by the Oracle, who we'll read about today. So let's get into it. Please forgive me if I stutter, hesitate, or mispronounce anything, and for any noises in the background. Let's go. The Oracle. I was suddenly sucked out of the 2D dimension and blacked out. When I awoke, I found myself in a strange mountaintop, shrine surrounded by clouds, looking up at a seven-eyed creature, Chehasselbrom the Unanswering. She told me I was in the dimension of 52, and that she had been treating my wounds for a long time. Strangely, she seemed to already know my name and what my mission was. Dimension 52. Whether she was psychic or had just read my wanted poster, it's hard to say, but she had some stunning insight about Bill. She said that if I was truly wanted to face him again, I would have to protect my mind, and that she would help me, but it would require putting a metal plate in my head with a difficult surgery. Maybe it was the thin mountain air, but I agreed instantly. For a week as I recovered, we had many long conversations about Bill. Apparently, his thirst for power caused him to destroy his home dimension, including his parents and everyone else he'd ever known. She spoke of him without anger, but with a calm, steely, clinical resolve to see his reign of terror end. She looked deep into my eyes and said I had the face of a man who was destined to destroy Bill. I was so excited that we spent the entire night partying and drinking cosmic sand, the very same kind Time Baby himself consumes. When I awoke the next morning, she was gone, and I was in another dimension entirely. It was time to continue my quest. I sometimes wonder where she is now and how she knew so much about me. And on the Oracle page, there is a code that says, the opposite of Bill. Parallel Earth dimensions. Unlike the dimensions I've already described, many dimensions in the multiverse are parallel Earths, very similar to my dimension, but with few major differences. There are parallel Earths where dinosaurs still rule, one way or another, and ones where dolphins, rather than Homo sapiens, took over the dominant species after the dinosaurs went extinct. These dolphin Earths invariably have the best water parks. There's a dimension where all music is just screaming, and one where tennis balls chase dogs, and one where everyone is the same except they're all babies. I didn't linger there too long. I don't care for being spit up on. A better world. But after nearly 30 years of dimensional hopping, I came upon a parallel Earth almost identical to my own. There was at least one crucial difference. On this Earth, I was never pushed into the portal by Stan. On this Earth, my brother listened to me and took Journal 1 away from Gravity Falls. On this Earth, I reunited with Fiddleford, and together we created a dimensional vortex neutralizer that allowed us to use the portal without any risk of a connection to Bill's nightmare realm. By the time I visited this parallel Earth, my parallel self was a celebrated star of the scientific community, and my small cabin in Gravity Falls had become the sprawling interdimensional institution of autology. Like a moth to a flame, I was drawn toward the Institute. Luckily for the particular Earth, I ran into parallel Fiddleford before encountering my parallel self. He quickly recognized that I was not his Stanford Pines and had me detained by campus security. I put up quite a fight, but when I finally calmed down, PF explained why he was holding me captive. A few years back, he had been leading a portal expedition into a particularly dangerous dimension when one of the security officers ran into his parallel self. As soon as they touched hands, the entire dimension began to wrap around and fizz with static. Fiddleford and the rest of his team escaped back to their own dimension, but that officer was never heard from again. In fact, that whole dimension has ceased to exist. As much as I might have wanted to revel in my parallel self's success, it was clear that there was literally no place for me in this dimension. Even if I could have stayed there for the rest of my days, my own conscience would not have allowed it. I still held on to the vow I had made close to 30 years earlier to destroy Bill Cipher. When I mentioned my vendetta to PF, his knee began to bounce with agitation and excitement, the same as my own Fiddleford's knee. Although his dimension was safe from Bill, he understood the threat Cipher posed to the wider multiverse. He was anxious to help me in any way he could. I showed him my unfinished quantum destabilizer, a weapon I was designing to blast Bill into non-existence. The problem was the power source. In all my travels since leaving Johasselbrom, I had never come across an element that had both the necessary power and the required stability. PF suggested an element that he had discovered in the paradox dimension. It was inert when visible, but highly radioactive when hidden. He called it "now you see it, now you don't"-im. A unique flair for language was something else he had in common with my Fiddleford. After just a few days of tinkering and minor adjustments to my blaster design, the quantum destabilizer was finally finished, and I was ready to face Bill. My return to the Nightmare Realm was something that I had planned in my head for so long that it was difficult to believe it was actually happening. Plus, there are dimensions where everything happens in your head, so it can get confusing. But there was no mistaking the Nightmare Realm for another dimension. The constantly shifting kaleidoscope of color, lack of gravity, and persistent smell of burnt hair were all signs that I was in the right place. And of course, there was also the fact that Bill Cipher instantly spotted me and unleashed his goons. Although I was 30 years older than the last time I had faced these monsters, I was a fair bit more fit and agile. Also, having a death ray in my hands did have its advantages. Quadrangle of Quan Fusion. With the henchmen in disarray, I had what would probably be my only chance to attack Bill directly. Cipher sensed that, for once, momentum was not on his side, and so he retreated to something called the Quadrangle of Quan Fusion. I only had minutes till Bill's forces regrouped, and it would take me hours to untangle the unreal architecture of his fortress. Then I realized that in the Nightmare Realm, you did not need to follow the rules of physics, and I lunged right at him. The moment I had worked towards and struggled for all those long years had finally come. I had Bill Cipher in my crosshairs. But at that moment, the entire Nightmare Realm shook as the portal was reactivated. There was no time to question why or to curse my luck. Bill was incapacitated with laughter, but I needed to beat the rest of his hench monsters to the portal, or my home would be invaded by Bill's forces. I ran along the length of the quadrangle, and as I approached the edge, I jumped up in the air while simultaneously tossing a concussion grenade behind me. The forces of the blast catapulted me past Bill's demonic gang and through the portal. The passage between the two dimensions collapsed behind me. I re-entered the world of my youth to face a brother I had not seen in 30 years. My frustration was indescribable. Once again, my brother's actions had sabotaged everything I had ever worked towards. My resolve to defeat Bill has never been stronger. And that's where we're going to end off for this chapter. And that is really sad to hear. It was awesome to hear about all of Ford's adventures in these 30 years. Of course, not all of them, but all the ones we did get to hear about. But it's also really sad to hear that he was about to defeat Bill. He had him. He was going to blast him with his ray. Things were going to be okay. But Stan had to open the portal right then, right there. And everything went to flames. Ford's plans down the drain. But it was really cool getting to learn about all of this, and I hope you guys are excited for next chapter where we get back to the present events, technically. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Gravity Falls and Journal 3 belong to Alex Hirsch and Disney Channel. Please go support Gravity Falls and go buy Journal 3. Bye-bye!